Captain Marcus Chen stared at the flickering distress beacon on his navigation console, its urgent red pulse cutting through the darkness of the Kepler system's asteroid field. 3 days into what should have been a routine cargo run to the outer colonies. And now this. The signal was weak, almost lost among the cosmic interference, but it was definitely there. Computer. Analyze the distress signal. Origin and species identification. The ship's AI responded in its usual calm tone. Signal originates from coordinates 247.3 by 89.7, approximately 12,000 kilometers starboard. Species identification, unknown. The signal pattern doesn't match any known Galactic Federation protocols. Marcus rubbed his stubbled chin. In his 15 years hauling freight across the galaxy, he'd encountered dozens of alien species, each with their own technologies and customs. But an unknown signal in this remote sector was unusual, if not downright suspicious. The smart play would be to report it to Federation authorities and continue on his route. But Marcus had never been accused of being overly smart. Change course. Set intercept trajectory for the signal source. The Stellar Wanderer, his modified freight hauler, adjusted its heading with a subtle thrum of its engines. Through the reinforced viewport, Marcus watched the tumbling asteroids drift past like ancient monuments in space. This system had been mined out decades ago, leaving behind a graveyard of broken rock and abandoned mining stations. 30 minutes later, he found the source of the distress call. The ship was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Where human vessels favored angular, practical designs and most alien craft followed organic curves, this one seemed to blend both philosophies into something entirely unique. Its hull was a deep violet color that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light of the distant star. And it was embedded nose first into a massive asteroid, clearly the result of some kind of emergency landing. Life signs? Marcus asked. Scanning? Yes. One life form detected. Vital signs are weak but stable. The ship's power systems are failing. Marcus maneuvered the Wanderer close enough to extend his docking tube. The unknown vessel's airlock was damaged but still functional. He suited up, grabbed his emergency kit, and made his way across. The interior of the alien ship was as strange as its exterior. The corridors were wider than human standard, with a subtle curve to the walls that made them feel organic rather than constructed. Bioluminescent panels provided soft lighting, though many were flickering or dark entirely. Following his scanner's readings, Marcus found the ship's pilot in what appeared to be the bridge. She was unconscious, slumped over a control console that looked more grown than built. She was definitely female, though her species was unfamiliar to him. Her skin had a slight blue tint and seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her hair was silver-white and fell in waves past her shoulders. She was tall, probably 6.5 feet, with an elegant build that suggested both strength and grace. Most striking were the crystalline formations along her temples and the backs of her hands, glowing faintly with the same inner light as her skin. Definitely alive, Marcus muttered, checking his scanner. Her vital signs were stable but weak. Whatever had happened here, she needed medical attention soon. Making a decision that would change everything, Marcus carefully lifted her from the pilot's chair. She was lighter than he expected, and her skin felt warm despite its blue tint. He carried her back to his ship, settling her in his small medical bay before returning to salvage what he could from her vessel. Her ship's databanks were encrypted beyond anything he could crack, but he managed to retrieve some personal items and what looked like important documents before the vessel's power finally failed completely. Back on the Wanderer, Marcus did what he could with his limited medical supplies. Her physiology was humanoid enough that basic first aid seemed to help. He monitored her vital signs, administered fluids, and waited. She woke up 3 hours later. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises the color of deep amethyst. For a moment, she seemed disoriented, looking around the unfamiliar medical bay, then her gaze fixed on Marcus, sitting in a chair beside her bed. She said something in a language he'd never heard, musical and flowing like water over stones. When he shook his head to indicate he didn't understand, she tried again in what sounded like 3 different languages, before finally speaking in accented but clear galactic standard. Where am I? You're aboard my ship, the Stellar Wanderer. I'm Captain Marcus Chen. I found you crashed in the asteroid field. She tried to sit up, winced, and settled back against the pillow. My ship. Power failure. I'm sorry, but it was already too damaged to save. I managed to get some of your personal effects. Her expression cycled through several emotions too quickly for Marcus to interpret. You saved me. Anyone would have done the same. She studied his face intently as if memorizing every detail. No, not anyone. Most would have reported the signal to authorities and continued on their way. You came yourself. You took risks? What's your name? Marcus asked, deflecting the attention away from his actions. Zarathi of the ethereal courts. But you may call me Zara. She paused. What manner of being are you? Your species is unknown to me. Human. From Earth. We're relatively new to the galactic community. Something flickered in her amethyst eyes. Human, she repeated as if testing the word. I have heard whispers of your kind. They say humans are unusual among the galactic species. Unusual how? That you act on instinct and emotion rather than pure logic. That you take risks others would not. That you show kindness to strangers without thought of reward. Her crystalline markings pulsed slightly brighter. I thought these were myths. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. We're not that different from other species, are you not? Zara's gaze intensified. Tell me, Marcus Chen of Earth, what do you gain from rescuing me? What reward do you expect?
None. I just couldn't leave someone to die. The crystals along her temples flared with light and she sat up despite her obvious discomfort.
Impossible. Every species in the galaxy operates on reciprocal benefit. Even the most charitable acts are performed with expectation of social or material gain. Maybe that's true for other species, Marcus said quietly. But humans sometimes do things just because they're right. For a long moment, Zara stared at him in silence. Then she did something that would echo through both their futures and beyond. She reached out with one elegant hand and gently touched his arm. Then I, Zarathi of the ethereal courts, declare myself under your protection, Marcus Chen of the humans. By the ancient laws of my people, I am yours until this debt is repaid. Marcus blinked. Wait, what? You don't owe me anything. You do not understand, Zara interrupted, her voice taking on a formal tone. Among my people, a life debt is sacred. Until I have saved your life in return, I am bound to you. And with those words, spoken in the medical bay of a freight hauler drifting through an asteroid field, began a partnership that would shake the foundations of galactic politics and redefine what it meant to be human among the stars. The next 72 hours aboard the Stellar Wanderer were unlike anything Marcus had experienced in his years of solitary freight hauling. Zara proved to be a fascinating and puzzling companion, her presence transforming the familiar spaces of his ship into something entirely new. She was fascinated by everything. The ship's basic artificial gravity system, which she examined with the intensity of a scholar studying ancient texts. The food synthesizer, which she declared primitive but ingeniously practical. Even Marcus's collection of old Earth music, which she listened to with an expression of wonder that made him self-conscious about his taste in classical rock. But it was her questions about human behavior that caught him off guard. You live alone on this vessel, she observed on her second day of recovery, standing in the ship's small galley while Marcus prepared their morning meal. Her injuries were healing at a remarkable rate, the crystalline formations along her skin glowing brighter as she regained her strength. Most freight haulers work alone, Marcus replied, not looking up from the food synthesizer. It's more efficient perhaps, but your species is social. I have been studying the cultural data in your ship's computer. Humans form complex social bonds, live in communities, seek companionship, yet you choose isolation. Marcus paused in his preparation. It's not isolation. It's independence. Is there a difference? He turned to look at her, struck by the genuine curiosity in her amethyst eyes. She wasn't judging, merely trying to understand. Sometimes, when you've been let down enough times, independence starts looking better than companionship. Ah, Zara said softly. You have been hurt, haven't we all? She moved closer, and Marcus noticed again how gracefully she carried herself, as if she were dancing through the air rather than walking. Among my people, isolation is considered a form of madness. We believe consciousness requires connection to remain healthy. What are your people like? Marcus asked, deflecting again. The ethereal courts? Zara's expression grew complex. We are political beings. Everything is negotiation, alliance, debt, and obligation. We live for centuries. So every interaction must be considered for its long-term implications. Spontaneous action is considered not just foolish but dangerous. Sounds exhausting. It is, she admitted, which is perhaps why your rescue of me was so shocking. You saw a distress signal from an unknown species and responded immediately, without thought of consequences or reward. Such behavior would be considered aberrant among my people, but not wrong. No, Zara said, her crystalline markings pulsing with what Marcus was learning to recognize as intense emotion. Not wrong. Beautiful, perhaps. Certainly brave. Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's proximity alarm. Marcus checked the navigation console and frowned. We're approaching the Centauri trade station. I need to deliver my cargo and pick up supplies. A space station, Zara mused. I will see how other species interact with humans in a neutral environment. You don't need to come with me. The station is safe and you could rest here. No. Her voice was firm. I am bound to your protection. Where you go, I go. The Centauri trade station was a massive ring-shaped structure that served as a hub for commerce in this sector. Ships of dozens of different species docked at its external ports, their crews coming and going in the organized chaos of interstellar trade. Marcus had been visiting this station for years, and his arrival usually went unnoticed. But walking through the central concourse with Zara beside him was entirely different. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Even species that typically ignored each other paused to stare at the unusual pair. Is this normal? Zara asked quietly. Not even close, Marcus muttered. I'm usually invisible here. They made their way to the cargo bay where Marcus was scheduled to deliver his freight. The dock supervisor, a gruff Talarian with skin like polished stone, barely looked up from his manifest pad when they approached. Chen. Cargo hold 7. Standard delivery protocol. Then he glanced up and saw Zara. His stone-like features actually shifted in surprise. By the 7 moons. Is that an ethereal problem? Marcus asked, stepping slightly in front of Zara. Problem? No problem, just surprised. Ethereals don't usually travel on freight haulers, or with humans. The supervisor's compound eyes studied them both with obvious curiosity. No offense intended, of course. None taken, Zara replied with perfect diplomatic grace. Captain Chen has been most accommodating. After completing the cargo delivery, they made their way to the central marketplace to resupply. The attention they drew intensified. Marcus noticed beings from species he'd traded with for years now watched him with new interest. Conversation stopped as they passed, resuming in hushed tones once they were gone. At the food vendor's stall, Marcus ordered his usual supplies from Keth, a friendly Arcturian who'd been selling provisions at this station for decades. Marcus, my friend, Keth said, his tentacles gesturing in what Marcus had learned was the Arcturian equivalent of a smile. I see you travel with distinguished company. Just helping someone who needed it, Marcus replied. Ah, but an ethereal? They are nobility among their people, Marcus. Ancient bloodlines, immense wealth, political power that spans star systems. Keth's eye stalks focused on Zara with obvious respect. For one to travel with a human freight captain. It is most unusual. Before Marcus could respond, a new voice cut through the market's noise. Well. If it isn't Marcus Chen, the most boring human in the sector. Marcus turned to see Captain Vex Thornridge approaching, flanked by 2 of his crew members. Thornridge was everything Marcus wasn't. Flashy, loud, and completely without scruples. He ran what was technically a legitimate shipping operation, but everyone knew he was willing to transport anything for the right price, legal or otherwise, Thornridge. Marcus nodded coolly. Heard through the grapevine that boring old Marcus has gotten himself some exotic company. Thornridge's gaze fixed on Zara with an expression that made Marcus's jaw clench. Don't suppose the lady would be interested in traveling with a real ship? I've got luxury accommodations, proper crew, connections throughout the sector. Zara stepped forward, and Marcus noticed the temperature around them seemed to drop several degrees. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made even the bustling marketplace seem to quiet. I am Zarathi of the Ethereal Courts, daughter of the Crystal Throne, heir to the Nebula Reach territories. Her crystalline markings blazed with cold light. This human is under my protection as I am under his. Your words dishonor us both. Thornridge actually took a step back, his face paling as the implications hit him. I meant no disrespect, Your Highness. I was merely... You were merely leaving, Zara finished. Now, Thornridge and his crew retreated quickly, melting back into the crowd. Marcus stared at Zara, pieces falling into place. Daughter of the Crystal Throne? He asked quietly. Zara's fierce expression softened. You did not know what you saved, did you? I saved someone who needed help. That's all that mattered. Her amethyst eyes widened slightly. Even now, knowing who I am, your answer remains the same. Should it change? Most beings would immediately begin calculating how to profit from the connection. You look troubled. Marcus was troubled, not because of who she was, but because of what it meant. People are going to make assumptions about us, about why you're traveling with me. Let them, Zara said firmly. You saved my life without thought of reward. Such honor deserves recognition, not hiding. As they finished their shopping and made their way back to the Wanderer, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The way other beings looked at him now, the deference in their voices, the careful respect they showed, it was all because of her. But the most unsettling change was in himself. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. The loneliness that had been his constant companion seemed to have lifted, replaced by something he wasn't quite ready to name. As they reached the ship, Zara paused at the airlock. Marcus, yeah, thank you. Not just for the rescue, but for treating me as simply Zara, not as nobility or asset or political opportunity. You're welcome. She smiled then, and the expression transformed her face completely. I begin to understand what makes humans so remarkable, and why I find myself proud to be under your protection. Marcus felt that warmth in his chest again, stronger this time. As they boarded the ship and prepared to depart, he couldn't help but wonder what other changes this unlikely partnership would bring to his carefully ordered, solitary life. 2 weeks after leaving Centauri Trade Station, Marcus was beginning to understand that life with Zara would never be predictable. She had transformed his simple freight run into something resembling a diplomatic mission, complete with unexpected stops, mysterious messages, and increasingly curious attention from other ships. The latest complication came in the form of a sleek, ethereal naval vessel that had been matching their course for the past 6 hours, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly following them. The ISV Luminous Dawn, Zara said, reading from her personal communicator. Captain Thaneval commanding. He's been ordered to escort me home. Marcus glanced at her from the pilot's seat. She'd been growing quieter over the past few days, and now he understood why. Home? The ethereal courts received word of my rescue. They're concerned about my continued absence. She set down her communicator with visible reluctance. And about the company I'm keeping. Meaning me, meaning you. Zara moved to stand beside his chair, her presence both comforting and unsettling. They don't understand why I remain with a human freight captain when I could return to comfort and safety. Why do you? Marcus asked, surprising himself with the question. Zara was quiet for a long moment. At first it was duty, the life debt, the ancient obligations, but now... She paused, her crystalline markings pulsing with soft light. Now I think I remain because for the first time in my life I'm not defined by my bloodline or political value. With you I am simply Zara. Before Marcus could respond, the communication console chimed. The face that appeared on screen was unmistakably ethereal. Elegant features, silver hair, and the same amethyst eyes as Zara, though his crystalline formations were more pronounced and glowed with authority. Sister, the figure said formally, I am Captain Thaneval. I bring greetings from the Crystal Throne and orders for your immediate return. Brother, Zara replied, her voice taking on the same formal tone. I am honored by the court's concern, but I remain bound by sacred obligation. The human saved your life, yes. The court acknowledges this debt, but surely it can be settled with appropriate compensation. There is no need for you to continue this primitive existence. Marcus felt his jaw clench at the dismissive tone, but Zara's response cut through his irritation. You misunderstand the nature of my debt, brother, and you insult my protector. Protector? Thaneval's eyebrows rose. Sister, you are heir to star systems. What protection could a human possibly offer you? More than you might think, Zara said quietly. Tell me, Thaneval, when did you last act without considering the political implications? When did you last make a choice based solely on what was right rather than what was advantageous? Such behavior would be irresponsible. Such behavior, Zara interrupted, is what makes humans remarkable. Captain Chen risked his life to save a complete stranger, expecting nothing in return. Can you say the same? Thanevel's expression shifted, confusion replacing authority. That is not how civilized beings behave. Perhaps, Zara said, we should reconsider our definition of civilization. The conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms from both ships. Marcus checked his sensors and swore under his breath. 3 ships coming in fast. Configuration unknown. On screen, Thanevel had turned to his own tactical officer. Confirmed. 3 vessels, definitely not Galactic Federation registry. They're jamming our identification scans. The attacking ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls dark and angular. No response to hails, no warning shots, they simply opened fire. Pirates, Marcus said grimly, throwing the Wanderer into evasive maneuvers. They've been tracking us since the station. The luminous dawn moved to intercept, its weapon systems powering up. But the attackers had planned well. 2 ships engaged the naval vessel while the 3rd came straight for Marcus and Zara. Why would pirates attack an ethereal noble? Marcus asked, wrestling with the controls as energy bolts flashed around them. Because, Zara said quietly, an ethereal heir is worth more than entire star systems in ransom, and they probably think you're an easy target. They're about to learn otherwise. Marcus had modified the Wanderer over the years, adding defensive systems that most freight haulers couldn't afford and wouldn't need. But he'd learned long ago that space was dangerous for those who traveled alone. The pirate ship was faster and more maneuverable, but Marcus knew his ship better than anyone alive. He led them through the nearby asteroid field, using the massive rocks as cover and confusion. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us, Zara observed, watching the tactical display. They want us alive. That's their mistake. Marcus waited until the pirate ship committed to an attack run, then did something that violated every rule of space combat. He killed his engines and let the ship go into a controlled tumble. The pirate vessel, expecting evasive action, overshot their position. In that moment of confusion, Marcus brought his weapons online and fired. The modified freight hauler's defensive systems weren't military grade, but they were more than sufficient for a pirate ship that hadn't expected any resistance. The attacking vessel's shields collapsed under the unexpected barrage, and its engines went dead. Impossible, came a transmission from the disabled pirate ship. A freight hauler just took out our interceptor. This is Captain Marcus Chen. Marcus broadcast on all frequencies. You attacked the wrong target. Stand down immediately or be destroyed. There was a long pause. Then Chen? The human? Marcus exchanged glances with Zara. You know who I am? Every pirate in this sector knows about the human who travels with an ethereal princess. Word is there's a massive bounty on both of you. Bounty from who? But the pirates were already retreating, their damaged ship limping away while its companions disengaged from the luminous dawn. In the aftermath, as both ships checked for damage, Thanevel's face reappeared on screen. His expression had changed completely. Captain Chen, he said formally, I owe you an apology. And my thanks. No apology necessary. Anyone would have. No, Thanevel interrupted firmly. Not anyone. I have commanded naval vessels for 3 centuries. I have never seen a freight captain engage 3 hostiles to protect someone they barely know. He paused. My sister was right. There is something remarkable about your species. We just do what needs doing. Yes, Thanevel said slowly. You do. Which brings me to a difficult question. The pirates mentioned a bounty. Someone wants both of you badly enough to put a price on your heads that would tempt even organized crime. Zara stepped forward. Who would dare place a bounty on an ethereal heir? Someone with resources equal to the ethereal courts, her brother replied grimly. Someone who sees political advantage in either ransoming you or preventing your return home. His expression darkened. Sister, I fear your rescue has attracted the attention of forces that view human ethereal cooperation as a threat. Marcus felt cold understanding wash over him. They're not after her. They're after what we represent. Explain. A human and an ethereal working together as equals. No politics, no calculations, just partnership. Marcus looked at Zara. Someone sees that as dangerous. It is dangerous, Zara said quietly, to those who profit from keeping species separate and suspicious of each other. Thanevel nodded slowly. The implications are staggering. If humans prove capable of forming genuine bonds with other species, without the usual power structures and political constraints, it changes everything, Marcus finished. Indeed. Which means, Thanevel said, that you are both in far greater danger than we realized, and perhaps more important than any of us understood, as the two ships parted ways, the luminous dawn returning to ethereal space while the Wanderer continued on its modified route. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed some invisible line. What had started as a simple rescue was becoming something that might reshape galactic politics. And at the center of it all was his growing certainty that Zara was no longer just a passenger he was protecting. She was becoming something he wasn't ready to name, but was beginning to realize he couldn't live without. The bounty hunters would come. The political forces would mobilize. The galaxy would take notice, but for now, on a freight hauler crossing the void between stars, a human and an ethereal continued their journey together, neither fully understanding what they had set in motion, but both beginning to realize that some partnerships transcend species, politics, and even the careful calculations of interstellar diplomacy. The attack changed everything. 3 days after the encounter with the pirates, Marcus and Zara sat in the ship's small galley, reviewing intelligence reports that Zara had received through encrypted ethereal channels. The news wasn't good. 17 separate bounty contracts, Zara read from her communicator, her crystalline markings dim with worry, all posted within the last week. The prices are, she paused, shaking her head. Marcus, they're offering enough credits to buy entire colonies. Who's posting them? That's the troubling part. The credits are being laundered through so many intermediaries that even ethereal intelligence can't trace the source. But the pattern suggests coordination at the highest levels. Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. Someone really doesn't want us working together. Or they want to make an example of us. Zara set down her communicator and looked at him directly. Marcus, I need to ask something difficult. Go ahead. Would you be safer if I left? The question hit him like a physical blow. Zara, I'm serious. Before you rescued me, you lived quietly, invisibly. Now you're a target because of your association with me. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see the pain in her amethyst eyes. I won't be responsible for your death. And I won't be responsible for abandoning someone who needs protection. Marcus met her gaze firmly. We're in this together, whether you like it or not, even if it means giving up your independence? Your simple life? Marcus considered the question seriously. His life had been simple, predictable, safe. Lonely but safe. Now every day brought new challenges, new dangers, new complications he'd never had to face before. It should have terrified him. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in years. Zara, when you found out who I was, just a freight captain, nobody special, did you consider leaving? Of course not. You saved my life. And when you found out I wasn't doing it for political gain or reward, did that change how you felt? It made me respect you more. Same here. When I learned you were ethereal nobility, it didn't change the fact that you're someone worth protecting. Someone worth... He paused, not quite ready to finish that sentence. Worth what? She asked quietly. Before he could answer, the ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message. The face that appeared on screen was human, but Marcus didn't recognize him. The man was well-dressed, with the kind of smooth confidence that marked him as either a diplomat or a criminal. Captain Chen, Princess Zarathi. My name is Director Harrison, and I represent certain interested parties who would like to resolve this situation peacefully. What situation? Marcus asked carefully. The unfortunate misunderstanding that has led to these bounty contracts. My clients are prepared to offer a very generous settlement in exchange for the princess's safe return to ethereal space, and your agreement to maintain discretion about recent events. Zara leaned forward, her expression dangerous. And if we refuse? Harrison's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew cold. Then I'm afraid the bounty hunters will continue to be a problem. And they're getting more sophisticated. The next group you encounter may not be as easily discouraged. Is that a threat? Marcus asked. It's a reality. You've attracted attention from forces much larger than yourselves. The smart play is to take the settlement and go back to your quiet lives. Counteroffer, Zara said, her voice carrying the authority of generations of nobility. Tell your clients that threatening an ethereal heir is an act of war. The Crystal Throne will not tolerate such insults. Harrison's composure cracked slightly. Your Highness, with respect, you're currently traveling on a freight hauler with a single human as protection. The Crystal Throne seems remarkably unconcerned with your welfare. The Crystal Throne, Zara replied coldly, is allowing me to fulfill a sacred obligation, but that patience has limits. After Harrison signed off, Marcus and Zara sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Marcus spoke. He's right about one thing. We can't keep running from professional hunters indefinitely. Then what do you suggest? Marcus stood up, moving to the viewport where stars streaked past in hyperspace. We stop running. We find out who's really behind this and deal with them directly. That could be suicide, or it could be the only way to end this. Marcus turned back to her. Zara, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. We use ourselves as bait. Make ourselves visible, predictable, draw them out into the open where we can identify them. Zara stared at him. That's not strategy, Marcus. That's madness, is it? Right now we're reacting to their moves, playing their game. But if we control when and where the confrontation happens, you're talking about deliberately walking into a trap. I'm talking about setting one. Marcus sat back down across from her. Look, we know they want us alive for maximum political impact. That gives us an advantage if we're smart about it. And if we're wrong, then at least we go out on our own terms instead of spending the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her crystalline markings pulsing with thought. There's something else. Something I haven't told you. What? The life debt between us. It's more complicated than I explained. Marcus felt a chill. How so? Among my people, when someone saves your life without expectation of reward, it creates what we call a soul bond. It's not just obligation, it's a recognition of fundamental compatibility at the deepest level. Zara, let me finish. The bond isn't one-sided. When you accepted my protection as I accepted yours, when you treated me as an equal rather than a political asset, you completed the second half of the bond. Marcus stared at her. What does that mean? It means that in the eyes of ethereal law and custom we are... She struggled with the translation. The closest human concept would be chosen partners, not quite married but bound together in a way that transcends political or social boundaries. The implications hit Marcus like an avalanche. That's why they want us separated. Yes, a soul bond between a human and an ethereal heir would set a precedent that could reshape interspecies relations for generations. Some see that as evolution. Others see it as a threat to the established order. And what do you see it as? Zara met his eyes directly. I see it as the best thing that's ever happened to me. Before Marcus could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. Through the viewport, he could see them dropping out of hyperspace near a massive space station he didn't recognize. That's not on any of my charts, Marcus said, moving to the controls. It's not on mine either, Zara replied, checking her own navigation systems. But we're being hailed. The communication screen activated, revealing a figure Marcus had hoped never to see again. Director Harrison, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood beings from multiple species, Telarian, Arcturian, even what looked like ethereal in formal court robes. Captain Chen, Princess Zarathi, Harrison said with false pleasantness. Welcome to Nexus Station. As you can see, this matter has attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic society. What do you want? Marcus asked bluntly. Simple. A demonstration that human-alien partnerships are inner. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the Battle of Nexus Station, though those who lived through it would always think of it as the Day of Freight. Captain and an ethereal princess proved that some bonds are stronger than politics. The first wave of bounty hunters dropped out of hyperspace expecting easy prey. What they found was a freight hauler that had been extensively modified by someone who understood both human engineering and ethereal technology. How exactly did you upgrade my ship? Marcus asked as he watched Zara's hands dance across control panels he didn't remember installing. I've been working on it during my recovery, Zara replied, her crystalline markings now blazing so brightly they illuminated the entire bridge. Ethereal biotechnology integrated with human mechanical systems. The result should be interesting. The Wanderer's hull began to shimmer with the same crystalline formations that marked Zara's skin. Energy patterns flowed across the ship's surface like living light, and Marcus felt the vessel respond to his commands with an awareness that seemed almost alive. Zara, what did you do to my ship? I bonded it to us, she said simply. The vessel is now an extension of our partnership. It will respond to both our intentions. The lead bounty hunter ship opened fire, expecting their weapons to overwhelm a simple freight hauler's defenses. Instead, the energy bolts were absorbed by the crystalline formations and redirected back at the attackers with twice the force. Impossible, came a transmission from the attacking vessel. Freight haulers don't have ethereal shielding. This one does, Marcus replied, pushing the ship into a series of maneuvers. That should have been impossible for a vessel of its size and class, but the real surprise came when Nexus Station itself opened. Fire on the bounty hunters, what are they doing? Zara asked, watching the massive station's weapons tear through the first wave of attackers. They're protecting their investment, Marcus realized. They want us alive for their political theater. Can't do that if the bounty hunters destroy us first. The battle became a three-way fight, with the station defending Marcus and Zara from the bounty hunters while trying to force them to surrender. It might have worked, except for one thing the Galactic Stability Council hadn't accounted for. Other ships began dropping out of hyperspace. First came the Luminous Dawn, Zara's brother Thainville at the helm, followed by 3 more ethereal naval vessels. Then human ships began arriving. Not military vessels, but freight haulers, miners, and independent traders. Ships Marcus had traded with over the years. Captains who had heard about the bounty and decided they didn't like the precedent it set. The cavalry, Marcus muttered. More than that, Zara said, her voice filled with wonder. Look at the identification signatures. Marcus checked his sensors and felt his breath catch. Ships from dozens of species were converging on Nexus Station. Talarian merchants, Arcturian research vessels, even species he'd never heard of before. How did they all know to come here? Word travels fast in the galactic community, Zara replied. And apparently, our story has been spreading faster than the Stability Council anticipated. Harrison's face appeared on their communication screen again, his composed facade cracking. This is madness. You're going to start a war. No, came a new voice over the general communication frequency. You are. The speaker was Captain Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister, commanding a human military vessel that had just dropped out of hyperspace at the head of a small fleet. Sarah? Marcus stared at the screen in shock. What are you doing here? Protecting my little brother from people who think they can threaten humanity through intimidation, Sarah replied crisply. The Earth Defense Force received word about bounties being placed on human citizens. That constitutes an act of aggression. This is a private matter, Harrison protested. Threatening to destabilize human trade relations makes it a public matter. Sarah shot back. And frankly, the Earth Assembly is getting tired of older species treating us like children who need guidance. Thainville's voice joined the conversation. The ethereal courts concur. Attempts to coerce our nobility constitute acts of war. More voices joined the transmission. Captains from multiple species, all declaring their support for what they were calling the bonded pair, and their rejection of the Stability Council's ultimatum. Director Harrison looked around at his council members, his confidence finally beginning to crack. You're all making a mistake. The old ways have kept the peace for centuries, have they? The question came from an unexpected source, an elderly Talarian captain whose ship Marcus had barely noticed among the crowd. Or have they simply maintained the power of those who benefit from division? Captain Morden. Harrison's voice carried surprise and dismay. You're supposed to be on our side. I am on the side of progress, the Talarian replied. I have watched these two for weeks now. The human protects the ethereal not because of politics or profit, but because it is right. The ethereal stands by the human not because of obligation, but because of choice. This is what we should aspire to, not fear. The tide of opinion was shifting, Marcus could feel it. What had started as a political maneuver to separate him and Zara was becoming something much larger, a galactic referendum on whether the future would be built on division or unity. But the Stability Council wasn't finished yet. Very well, Harrison said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. If you won't separate voluntarily, we'll demonstrate why such bonds are dangerous. The station's weapon system suddenly swiveled toward the assembled fleet. Not the bounty hunters, but the ships that had come to support Marcus and Zara. Stand down or we open fire on all vessels, Harrison announced. The princess and the human will surrender themselves, or we'll show the galaxy the chaos their bond creates. You're bluffing. Sarah's voice was hard as steel. Fire on that fleet and you'll have a dozen species declaring war on your council. Better war than the collapse of galactic order. Marcus realized with cold certainty that Harrison meant it. The man was so committed to his vision of controlled galactic politics that he would actually start a war to prevent change. Zara, Marcus said quietly, can your ship modifications do more than just defense?
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking it's time to end this once and for all. Can you link us to the station systems? Zara's crystalline markings pulsed as she considered the possibility. It would be dangerous. If we're wrong about the compatibility, then we die. But if we do nothing, a lot of other people are going to die instead. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. The same expression she'd worn when she first declared her protection of him. Together? Together. Zara placed her hands on the ship's control interface while Marcus took the pilot controls. The crystalline formations that had spread across the ship's hull began to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats. And Marcus felt something extraordinary happen. He could sense Zara's thoughts, her intentions, her unwavering trust in him, and she could sense his determination, his protective instincts, his growing certainty that this bond between them was worth fighting for. Together, they reached out through the ship's enhanced systems, toward Nexus Station itself. What they found was a station run by beings so focused on control and order that they had forgotten the fundamental truth of galactic civilization. It was built by individuals making choices to work together, not by councils imposing unity from above. The station's weapon system shut down. The defensive screens dropped. The communication arrays began broadcasting a message across the galaxy. Not Harrison's carefully crafted political statement, but something much more powerful. The story of a human freight captain who risked everything to save a stranger. The story of an ethereal princess who chose partnership over politics. The story of two beings from different worlds who proved that the strongest bonds are forged by choice, not law. And across the galaxy, beings who had been watching this confrontation began to make their own choices. Trade unions announced they would no longer honor agreements that restricted cross-species cooperation. Defense treaties were rewritten to include provisions for individual choice over political mandate. Most importantly, individuals from dozens of species began seeking out partnerships based on compatibility rather than political advantage. On Nexus Station, Director Harrison stared at his console as system after system came under the control of the bonded pair in the freight hauler. This is impossible. Two beings can't override an entire station. They're not just two beings, Captain Morden said quietly. They're the future. And the future, Director, belongs to those brave enough to choose it. As the immediate crisis ended and the various fleets began to disperse, Marcus and Zara found themselves alone again on the bridge of the Wanderer. But they were no longer the same people who had met in a crashed ship among the asteroids. So, Marcus said, what happens now? Zara smiled, her crystalline markings settling into a steady, warm glow. Now we go home. Which home? Earth or the ethereal courts? Wherever we are together, Zara replied. That's home. 6 months after the Battle of Nexus Station, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching ships from dozens of species come and go in peaceful commerce. The station, built at the coordinates where their confrontation had taken place, served as both a symbol and a practical hub for the new era of galactic cooperation. The Arcturian delegation just arrived, Zara said, joining him at the viewport. Her crystalline markings had evolved over the months, now showing subtle patterns that Marcus had learned to read like expressions. Right now they showed contentment mixed with anticipation. Nervous about the speech? Marcus asked. Terrified, she admitted. It's one thing to inspire change through our actions. It's another to try to codify those changes into law. They were here for the signing of the Unity Accords, a new framework for interspecies relations based on individual choice and voluntary cooperation, rather than rigid political hierarchies. It had been Zara's idea, but Marcus had helped draft the practical applications. You'll do fine, Marcus assured her. Besides, you won't be speaking alone. No, Zara smiled. We never do anything alone anymore. Their bond had continued to evolve over the months. What had started as obligation and grown into partnership had become something deeper. a connection that transcended the physical and touched something fundamental about consciousness itself. Ethereal scientists were studying it, human researchers were fascinated by it, and other species were beginning to experience similar bonds of their own. Captain Chen, a young human woman, approached them, wearing the uniform of the Unity Station Diplomatic Corps. The delegates are ready for the preliminary briefing. As they made their way to the main conference room, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. The Galactic Stability Council had been dissolved after it became clear that most member species no longer supported their vision of controlled division. Director Harrison and his allies had retreated to a small group of hardline worlds, but their influence waned daily as more beings chose cooperation over isolation. The conference room held representatives from 47 different species, more than had ever, gathered for peaceful negotiations in galactic history. As Marcus and Zara entered, conversations quieted and attention focused on them. Distinguished delegates, Zara began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's translation systems. 6 months ago, many of you believed that differences between species were barriers to be managed rather than strengths to be celebrated. Today we gather to prove otherwise. She gestured to a holographic display showing statistics from across the galaxy. Trade between previously isolated species has increased by 300%. Scientific cooperation has produced breakthrough technologies that no single species could have achieved alone. Most importantly, individual happiness and fulfillment scores have risen across all participating worlds. An elderly Talarian delegate raised one stone-like hand. Princess, these improvements are encouraging. But some of us worry about the long-term implications. What happens when these voluntary bonds create conflicts with traditional authorities? Marcus stepped forward. With respect, delegate, that concern assumes traditional authorities know what's best for individuals better than the individuals themselves. Our experience suggests otherwise. But without hierarchical structure, how do we maintain order? The question came from a Rigelian commander whose species had built their entire civilization on military discipline. Through willing cooperation rather than forced compliance, Zara replied. Look around this room. 47 species working together not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. If that isn't order, what is? The debate continued for hours, but Marcus could sense the tide of opinion. The older delegates, those who had built careers on managing interspecies tensions, were gradually being outnumbered by younger representatives who had grown up hearing about the bonded pair and the possibilities they represented. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Captain Morden, the Talarian who had supported them at Nexus Station, stood slowly. I have served in galactic politics for over 2 centuries, he said, his gravelly voice carrying absolute authority. I have seen war and peace, cooperation and conflict, progress and stagnation, and I tell you now that these 2 beings have accomplished more for galactic unity in 6 months than the rest of us managed in 2 centuries. He turned to face Marcus and Zara directly. The question is not whether individual choice threatens traditional authority. The question is whether traditional authority deserves to exist if it cannot earn individual loyalty. By the end of the day, the Unity Accords had been signed by 39 of the 47 delegations. The 8 holdouts weren't hostile. They simply asked for more time to consider the implications for their own societies. That evening, Marcus and Zara found themselves alone on the observation deck again, watching the stars wheel slowly past as the station rotated. Do you think it will work? Zara asked. This new approach to galactic relations? I think it's already working, Marcus replied. Look around. 6 months ago, most of these species barely talked to each other. Now they're planning joint colonies and research projects. But what about us? Where do we fit in this new galaxy we've helped create? Marcus considered the question. They had become symbols, representatives of a new way of thinking about interspecies relationships. But symbols could become prisoners of their own significance. I think, he said slowly, we keep doing what we've always done. We make choices based on what's right, rather than what's expedient. We support each other, and we show the galaxy that bonds freely chosen are stronger than any chains imposed by politics. Zara moved closer to him, her hand finding his. Even if it means giving up the quiet life you used to have? Marcus laughed. Zara, the quiet life was just me hiding from the possibility of connection. I thought independence meant not needing anyone. But you showed me that real independence means being free to choose who to trust, who to protect, who to—" He paused, still sometimes struggling with the words. "Who to love," Zara finished softly. "Yeah, who to love." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ships come and go. Then Zara spoke again. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you." "What?" "The ethereal courts have officially recognized our bond as a new form of diplomatic alliance. Other species are beginning to acknowledge similar bonds within their own populations. But more than that, Zara turned to face him fully, her crystalline markings blazing with excitement and nervousness. "The xenobiologists believe our bond may be evolving into something unprecedented, a true merger of consciousness while maintaining individual identity." Marcus felt a flutter of something that might have been fear or anticipation. "What does that mean?" "It means we may be becoming something new. Not human, not ethereal, but something that incorporates the best of both." She paused. "Are you ready for that level of change?" Marcus looked out at the ships representing dozens of species, all working together in ways that had been impossible just months before. He thought about the scared, lonely freight captain he'd been and the man he was becoming. He thought about the galaxy they were helping to build, where individuals could choose their own destinies rather than accepting the roles politics assigned them. "I'm ready," he said. "As long as we're changing together." Zara's smile could have powered the station's reactors. "Always together." As they embraced, their combined presence seemed to resonate through the station itself. Across Unity Station, beings from dozens of species paused in their work, touched by a momentary sense of connection, of possibility, of hope. The galaxy was changing, one choice at a time. And at the center of that change, a human freight captain and an ethereal princess continued to prove that the strongest bonds are forged not by law or politics or necessity, but by the simple decision to care for another being more than for oneself. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging. But the beings who traveled between them were writing a new chapter in galactic history, and that chapter began with 5 simple words. "I took her aboard my ship." Everything else had followed from that single act of kindness, rippling outward to touch lives across the galaxy and proving that sometimes the smallest choices have the largest consequences. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the garden dome of the expanded Unity Station, watching Zara tend to a collection of plants from dozens of different worlds. The crystalline formations along her skin had continued to evolve, now forming intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living art, but more remarkable was how the plants responded to her presence. Species that should have been incompatible with each other thrived side by side under her care. "The Terran roses are blooming next to ethereal crystal flowers," Marcus observed, still amazed by what their bond had made possible. "Everything grows better with the right companionship," Zara replied, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there when they first met. "Even impossible combinations." Marcus nodded, understanding her meaning on multiple levels. Their own bond had continued to deepen and evolve, becoming something that xenobiologists were still struggling to categorize. They remained distinctly themselves, but they were also becoming something new, a bridge between species that demonstrated possibilities no one had imagined. "Any word from the exploration fleets?" Zara asked, settling beside him on a bench crafted from living ethereal crystal and earth oak. 3 more systems have requested membership in the Unity Alliance, Marcus reported, including the Voidwalkers. Zara's eyebrows rose. The energy beings from the galactic edge? They never interact with physical species. Apparently, they're curious about consciousness bonds that transcend physical form. Our connection is giving them ideas about cooperation with corporeal beings. It was a pattern that had repeated across the galaxy over the past year. The bond between Marcus and Zara had become a catalyst for change that reached far beyond anything they had anticipated. Species that had been isolated for millennia were seeking contact. Ancient enemies were finding common ground. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic politics for eons were giving way to fluid networks of voluntary cooperation. But with success had come new challenges. "The Convergence Council wants to meet with us again," Marcus said, referring to the loose alliance of species that had replaced the old Galactic Stability Council. "More questions about replication protocols?" "Among other things." They're still trying to understand how to encourage bonds like ours without forcing them. Zara laughed, a sound that seemed to harmonize with the crystalline wind chimes hanging throughout the garden.
They're missing the point.
Bonds like ours can't be manufactured or mandated. They can only be chosen. Try explaining that to politicians. Every day, Zara replied with a smile. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their assistant, a young Arcturian named Kayla whose tentacles shimmered with excitement. Captain Chen, Princess Zarathi, there's an urgent message from the Outer Rim, a first contact situation. Marcus and Zara exchanged glances. First contact protocols had become their specialty over the past year, as their unique perspective on interspecies relationships made them natural ambassadors. Details? Marcus asked. A species calling themselves the Synthesis. They claim to be refugees from beyond our galaxy, seeking sanctuary from something they call the Conformity. Kayla's primary eye stalk focused on them intently. But here's the interesting part. They say they came specifically looking for the bonded pair who teaches choice over compulsion. Us, Zara said quietly. Apparently, word of your partnership has spread beyond our galaxy, Kayla confirmed. The Synthesis have been traveling for decades based on stories of beings who prove that different forms of consciousness can unite without losing their individuality. Marcus felt the familiar tingle of possibility mixed with apprehension. When do we leave? The ship is ready whenever you are, Kayla replied. But Captain Chen, Princess Zarathi, the Synthesis aren't the only ones who know about you. Long-range sensors are detecting pursuit vessels. Whatever they're running from, it's following them. An hour later, Marcus and Zara were aboard their new ship, the Unity's Promise, a vessel designed specifically for their unique bond. Unlike the modified freight hauler where they'd first discovered their connection, this ship had been built from the ground up to integrate human engineering, ethereal biotechnology, and contributions from a dozen other species. The result was something unprecedented, a ship that responded not just to their commands but to their intentions, their emotions, their shared consciousness. Translation matrices active, Zara reported as they approached the coordinates where the Synthesis had been detected. But I'm getting some unusual readings. Unusual how? The Synthesis ships don't seem to be completely physical. They're phasing in and out of our dimensional space. Marcus checked his own sensors. Like the Void Walkers? Similar but different. The Void Walkers exist as pure energy. These beings seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They found the Synthesis fleet, holding position near a neutron star, clearly using its gravitational field as a defensive anchor. The ships themselves were beautiful and strange. Structures that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in what looked like crystalline mathematical equations. Greetings. Bonded pair, came the first transmission, spoken in perfect galactic standard despite the speaker clearly never having encountered the language before. I am First Harmony of the Synthesis. We have traveled far to find you. The face that appeared on their screen was humanoid but clearly artificial. Not robotic, but constructed from what looked like living mathematics given form. Behind First Harmony, Marcus could see other beings that seemed to be made of different materials entirely. Crystalline entities, energy patterns, even what looked like sentient plant life. What are the Synthesis? Zara asked directly. We are what becomes possible when different forms of consciousness choose to work together rather than compete, First Harmony replied. Each of us was once a separate species. Through voluntary merger, we have become something greater while retaining what made us unique. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. Like what's happening to us, precisely. Your bond demonstrates the same principles on a smaller scale. Two consciousnesses maintaining their individuality while creating something new together. First Harmony's mathematical features shifted in what might have been a smile. You are proof that our path is possible for others. What are you running from? Zara asked. First Harmony's expression grew grim. The Conformity, a collective consciousness that consumes other species by forcing them into absolute uniformity. They believe that differences create conflict, so they eliminate all differences. How? By overriding individual consciousness with a single shared mind. No personal choice, no individual thought, no unique perspectives. Perfect order through perfect control. Marcus felt sick. The opposite of everything we believe in. Yes. and they have been pursuing us across the void between galaxies because our very existence challenges their fundamental premise. We prove that unity doesn't require uniformity. The conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms. Long-range sensors detected massive vessels emerging from hyperspace, ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating areas of absolute darkness against the stars. The conformity, First Harmony said quietly. They have found us. The approaching fleet was vast, hundreds of ships that moved with perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single mind. Which, Marcus realized, they probably were. First Harmony, can your people fight them? We are not warriors. We are explorers, creators, beings who choose cooperation over conflict. The conformity are different. Marcus looked at Zara, seeing his own determination reflected in her amethyst eyes. Then I guess it's up to us. Marcus, there are hundreds of them. We can't possibly. We don't have to fight them, Marcus interrupted. We just have to prove them wrong. How? Marcus activated the ship's communication array, broadcasting on all frequencies toward the approaching conformity fleet. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Unity Alliance. I'm requesting direct communication with whoever's in charge of your fleet. The response came immediately, a voice that was simultaneously one and many, speaking with the absolute certainty of a consciousness that had never encountered doubt. Individual Chen. Individual Zarathi. You will submit to integration. Your bond demonstrates dangerous instability that threatens ordered existence. Actually, Marcus replied, our bond demonstrates that different consciousnesses can work together while remaining individual. Something your conformity can't achieve. Individuality creates conflict. Conflict creates chaos. Chaos creates suffering. We eliminate suffering by eliminating its source. You eliminate life by eliminating choice, Zara interjected. Suffering is part of growth, part of learning, part of what makes consciousness valuable. Incorrect. Perfect unity requires no growth, no learning, no change. We offer perfection. Marcus felt the bond between him and Zara pulse with shared understanding. We offer something better. We offer freedom. What happened next would be remembered as the moment of choice. Marcus and Zara, linked by their unprecedented bond, reached out through the Unity's promise to every conscious being within range. The synthesis, the approaching conformity drones, even the artificial intelligences running the various ship systems. They didn't try to control or convert or convince. They simply offered a choice. Feel what it's like to be connected while remaining yourself. Experience unity without uniformity. Choose cooperation without compulsion. The effect was instantaneous and galaxy-spanning. Every consciousness touched by their offer suddenly experienced what it meant to be both individual and connected, to be part of something greater while remaining uniquely themselves. For most beings, it was a revelation. For the conformity drones, it was devastating. Across the enemy fleet, individual consciousnesses began reasserting themselves. Drones that had been part of the collective for centuries suddenly remembered what it felt like to have personal thoughts, individual dreams, unique perspectives. The conformity's perfect order collapsed into joyous chaos as billions of suppressed consciousnesses chose freedom over uniformity. Impossible, came a transmission from the conformity flagship, but even that voice was no longer singular. Individual thought creates everything worth living for, Marcus finished. In the aftermath, as the former conformity drones celebrated their rediscovered individuality, and the synthesis began welcoming refugees from across the void, Marcus and Zara found themselves once again changed by what they had experienced. We're not just bonded anymore, are we? Marcus asked. No, Zara agreed. We're becoming something like a living bridge between all forms of consciousness. A demonstration that connection and individuality aren't opposites but partners. They stood together on the bridge of their impossible ship,